Hello and welcome to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In this video, we are going to include the next 20 creature cards with CMCs of 5 into our Momir Vig Cube. Greetings and salutations to the MTGBC. You are the MTG Burgeoning community. Welcome back to another installment of our ongoing Momir Vig Cube Series. If you are unfamiliar with this series, or maybe you just need a refresher, you can go fishing in the description below and look for the link that takes you right to MTG Burgeoning's introduction to the Momir Vig Cube. And while you're down there skulking around in the description, you can also click the link to Cube Cobra, where you can see the entire contents of the cube as it stands right now. So for today, this video, the next 20 creature cards with mana values of 5 are headed into the cube, and we begin with a mono-white Elephant Wizard. Who would not want to begin with an Elephant Wizard? All right, here we have a 3/3 Spell Tithe Enforcer. Spell Tithe Enforcer. All right, we're kicking things off in a grand fashion here with this Momir Vig video. Whenever an opponent plays a spell, that player sacrifices a permanent unless they pay 1 additional mana. So this nice little tax is a great way to slow our opponents down and make sure that their tempo kind of stays right behind ours. All right, creature number 2. That's going to go, that looks pretty straight. All right, creature number 2. We're going from mono white to mono blue. And here we have the Spiketail Drake. It's a 3/3 flying, and we can sacrifice Spiketail Drake, and we can counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. So our opponents are going to need to be very, very cautious if we have the Spiketail Drake on our side of the battlefield. They better leave some mana open, or they're not going to get their creature from the Momir Vig Cube. All right, creature number 3. We went mono white, we went mono blue. Now it's mono green. You thought I was going to say mono black. All right, mono green, we have Splitting Slime. It's a 3/3 ooze, and it has the monstrosity mechanic. For 4 and 2 green mana, we can monstrositize, I think that's going to be a word, monstrositize 3 this ooze. If this creature is not monstrous, then we put 3 +1/+1 counters on it, and it becomes monstrous. So when we get to a 6/6 here, when Spitting Slime becomes monstrous, we create a token that's a copy of Splitting Slime. The token has no counters and is not monstrous. So we end up with a second Splitting Slime that we can do again we can pay again mana to make it monstrous, then make another copy, and then make another copy, and then I think you see what goes on here. But we're only going to be able to activate that ability if we have the 2 green mana to do so. Remember, in Momir Vig, you want to make sure you diversify your basic land library. And if you don't have those mountains, if you don't have those forests, then you do not have a monstrous ooze. All right, back-to-back mono green editions here for this episode of the Momir Vig Cube, and here we have the Spring Mantle Cleric. It's a 2/3 elf cleric, and when it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. Again, diversifying the basic lands in your basic land library can get the most out of Spring Mantle Cleric. If you are fortunate enough to channel 5 different colors of mana into your let's try that one again. If you're fortunate enough to channel 5 mana into your Momir Vig Simic Visionary Avatar, 1 mana of each color, and you get Spring Mantle Cleric, well, you just summoned a 7/8 to your side of the battlefield for just the investment of 5 mana. Again, it's going to be so dependent. Every creature that comes from the cube is done so randomly, so you never know what you're going to get out of any slot. All right, reaching the 1/4 mark of this video, we have our first colorless edition, and that is Staunch Throne Guard. It's a 2/5 construct with vigilance, and when it enters the battlefield, we become the monarch. We keep the monarch as long as no other opponents would deal combat damage to us. Once that happens, then that opponent becomes the monarch. And how we benefit from being the monarch? At the beginning of our end step, we draw a card. Card draw is very important in every format, even more particularly so here in Momir Vig. Remember, the cards in our hand are all basic lands. That's how we get them from our library. That are the only cards in our library. We must play our lands in order to generate the mana to summon our creatures from the cube, and each time we summon a creature from the cube, we must discard a card, which is a land. So any peripheral card draw abilities that we have is only going to help us to out-tempo and hopefully defeat our opponents. All right, our first mono red edition here, it is Stone Shock Giant. It's a 5/4 giant with another monstrosity ability. This one's going to cost us 6 and 2 red, and we will put 3+1/+1 counters on Stone Shock Giant when it becomes monstrous. And then when it does become monstrous, creatures without flying, our opponent's control, cannot block this turn. Yes, there is a number of flying creatures in the Momir Vig Cube, but I promise you the ground dwellers outnumber the flyers. So this monstrosity ability, this could end up becoming a game-winning ability as long as the combat math adds up. All right, next up, it's another mono blue edition, and here we have Shaboom Boom. We have ourselves a beast. It's blue, and it is called Strato Zeppelin. We have a 4/4 flyer that can only block creatures with flying. I'm going to be honest with you here, folks. If we're Momir Vigging it, and we have a 4/4 beast that can go into combat and deal 1/6 damage to an opponent's starting life total, I don't think we're worried about holding it back for blocking. Not at all. We're turning this baby sideways, we're pointing it at an opponent, and they're going to lower their life totals 4 points each time we connect with combat damage. All right, back-to-back mono blue editions. This one is Geist. Here we have another spirit or first spirit? Yeah, this is our first spirit in this video, many spirits in the previous videos. All right, we have a spirit here. It flies, and its power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in our hand. So if we're at the 5 spot, it's not out of the realm of possibility that we have no cards in hand, because again, we need to play our lands to generate the mana to use our avatar to summon our creatures, and we have to discard a card each time we do so. So it is possible that we summon this 5-drop to our side of the battlefield, and then it dies immediately. Hopefully that does not happen, because it has a very nice card draw ability. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we will draw a card. The flying is going to help to make sure that it has the evasion to sneak through with the combat damage. We just got to make sure that we have the cards in our hand to make sure it has a power and a toughness. All right, another mono white edition. This one is in the number 9 spots. We have Scorch Regent, a 4/3 dragon with flying. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, we put a +1/+1 counter on this dragon, and we gain 1 life. So as our opponents are filtering their mana into their avatar and summoning their creatures to their sides of the battlefield, our life total ticks up a little bit each time, and the Scorch Regent becomes even more threatening in combat. Remember, it does have flying. It starts off as a 4/3, and it's not like it's not like our opponents are going to be very easily to remove. It's not, let's try this again for the second time. It's not like our opponents are going to be able to very easily remove creatures from the battlefield. This is Momir Vig. There are no instants, there are no sorceries. It's all about creatures all the time. All right, we've reached the halfway point of this video, and we have another mono red edition, and this one is the Cert Land Flinger. Here we have a 4/6 giant berserker. Whenever Cert Land Flinger attacks, we may sacrifice another creature. When we do, Cert Land Flinger deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to any target. If the sacrificed creature was a giant, Cert Land Flinger deals twice that much damage instead. Note that this 5-drop is a 4/6, so I think we can comfortably send this bad boy into combat and feel good about its chances of surviving. And each time we turn it sideways, we sacrifice a creature, and it deals damage equal to its power to any target. All right, starting the second half of our creatures with CMCs of 5 here, we have Sir Alan the Lion's Claw. We got a 4/4 human knight that has first strike, and whenever it attacks, other creatures we control get +1/+1 until end of turn. That power and toughness boost is a nice little benefit that we can provide our army when we're swinging out against our opponents. And with Sir Alan having first strike, we have a reasonable chance of keeping him alive during combat. All right, so Sir Alan the Lion's Claw. Next up, we have another colorless edition. This time it's Tangle Hulk. We've got a 5/3 beast that we can pay 2 and a green mana to regenerate, but you're only going to be able to regenerate it if you have those forests. Next up, we're going back to Mono Blue, and we're going back to the days of Mirage. And here we go, folks. It's Taniwa. We've got a 7/7 legend. It doesn't even have a creature type. All right, so we have phasing and we have trample. Now, if you're unfamiliar with phasing, at the beginning of each player's turn, if you have any permanents that have phasing, they phase out, and any phased out permanents then phase back in. All right, and then at the beginning of our upkeep, all lands we control phase out. So again, this just highlights the point that not every single creature in the Momir Vig Cube is uber powerful or uber helpful. Having a 7/7 trampling creature and no lands alternating back and forth, ooh, that could be very troublesome. All right, next up, we're staying old school, but not quite as old as Taniwa. Here we have another colorless edition. It is Tech. We have a 2/2 dragon that gets +0/+2 if we control a plains, has flying if we control an island, gets +2/+0 as long as we control a swamp, has first strike if we control a mountain, and has trample if we control a forest. If there was ever a creature to make sure that you diversify your basic land library with as many variations as possible, Tech is that creature. At its peak, at its ceiling, Tech will be a 4/4 with flying, trample, and first strike for the investment of 5 mana. That's not too bad of an investment, but you gotta make sure you have the appropriate lands on your side of the battlefield. All right, reaching the 3/4 mark of this video, creature number 15 is a mono green edition, and here we have Tender Shoot Dryad. It's a 2/2 Dryad that has the Ascend mechanic. If we control 10 or more permanents, we get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. That's how Ascend works. At the beginning of each upkeep, we must focus on that. It's not just the beginning of our upkeep, but at the beginning of each upkeep, we create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. As we have highlighted so many times in these Momir Vig videos, any creatures that can create creatures are so highly coveted and so highly valuable. And as long as we have the City Blessing, Saprolings we control get +2/+2. Tender Shoot Dryad could be a win condition from the 5 spot. All right, next up, creature number 16, Mono Red. We have an old school back to the days of Onslaught. And here it is. We have Tephroderm. It is a 4/5 beast, and whenever a creature deals damage to Tephroderm, Tephroderm deals that much damage to that creature. So you got to think about being able to trade up with an opponent, especially if they're trying to block this to kill it, and hopefully from their side of the table trade down. And then whenever a spell deals damage, which we're just going to skip right over because in Momir Vig, there are no instants or sorceries, any damage that's going to be dealt is going to be through abilities. So for Tephroderm, it's a 4/5, and whenever a creature deals damage to it, it deals that much damage to that creature. It also should be noted that it does not have to be combat damage, it's just any form of damage. Our next creature is our first multicolored addition to this video, and boy oh boy is it a classic that's going to really put its controller ahead of the game. From Shadows over Innistrad, it's the Gettrog Monster. We have a 6/6 frog horror with Death Touch. At the beginning of our upkeep, we sacrifice the Gettrog Monster unless we sacrifice a land. And whenever one or more lands are put into our graveyard from anywhere, we draw a card. So think about this for a second. If you are fortunate enough to summon a copy of the Gettrog Monster to your side of the battlefield from the cube, and then you summon additional creatures from the cube after that, remember, we have to discard a card in order to activate the avatar. So once you discard that land to summon from the cube, you get to draw another land from your library. Remember, all cards in libraries are lands. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, you sacrifice one of those lands that are in play, it goes to the graveyard, and you draw another card. This is going to allow the Gettrog Monster's controller to be flush with cards in hand, which only leads to more and more land drops and more creatures summoned from the cube. Not to mention, you have the body of a 6/6 Death Toucher. The Gettrog Monster, similar to Tendershoot Dryad, could be a win condition coming out of the 5 spot. All right, next creature is another mono green edition. It is Thornling. Here we have a 4/4 elemental shapeshifter with 5 different activated abilities, 3 of which are forest specific. Again, insert your make sure you play with forest in your basic land library comment here. For 1 green mana, the Thornling gains haste until end of turn, or gains trample until end of turn, or is indestructible this turn. You just want to make sure you have so many forests on your side of the battlefield. For 1 generic mana, Thornling gets +1/-1 until end of turn, and for 1 generic mana, it gets -1/+1 until end of the turn. 5 different activated abilities, all so very powerful. Thornling could be one of those creatures that could come down and end up winning the game if you are fortunate enough to summon a copy of it to your side of the battlefield. Back-to-back mono green editions here. For creature number 19, we have Thragtusk. A 5/3 beast. When it ETBs, we gain 5 life. Let's not overlook how important that could be. We only start with 24 life, and this format is all about combat. So gaining life in any other peripheral means should be a highly celebrated feature for any creature that comes into play on our side of the battlefield. And when Thragtusk leaves the battlefield, we create a 3/3 green beast creature token. So Thragtusk provides life when it hits the scene, and then when it leaves a 3/3 body behind. And again, when creatures can create other creatures, that's just aces in our books, folks. All right, creature number 20 to bring this video to a close. It is another mono blue edition. Wow, 1/4 of the creatures in this video were mono blue. This time, it's Thrix, the Sudden Storm. It's a 4/5 elemental giant, and it has flash, which for the Momir Vig variant is meaningless because every creature is summoned randomly through the cube, and it has to be done at sorcery speed. It is a flyer, so it's a nice beefy body in the air. And spells we cast with converted mana cost 5 or greater cost 1 less to cast and can't be countered. The protection from being countered, that effect is pretty mitigated in this format because, again, we don't play with any instant or sorcery spells. There are some abilities of some creatures that could help to counter a spell, but that's a feat that is as rare as winter roses in this cube. More importantly for us is we get to reduce the cost of our summoned creatures by 1, meaning that we can get some of those biggins onto our side of the battlefield way ahead of curve. All right, MTG BC, there you have it. 20 more creature cards with a CMC of 5 going into the cube. Let me know in the comment section below which are your favorites. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic.